Welcome to Eternal Dread, where fear never sleeps. Tell us where you're watching from, and what time it is, because terror has no limits. If you're brave enough, share and comment, but beware, something might be watching you too. Now, turn off the lights, and let the dread begin. They gave me $1 million to keep my trap shut, and I did for 15 years. But last night I was making the rounds, and I saw the professor again. I had a heart attack 3 years back, and I tell you, when I saw him standing there in front of room 204, I felt another one coming on. He turned and smiled, and it was like he hadn't aged a day in 15 years. "Hey there, Chief," he said, and that was it. I dropped my clipboard on the ground and hightailed it out of there, never looking back. What I'm about to tell you is liable to make me sound crazier than a three-horned goat. But I promise you, there's crazier things out there. The cops don't believe me. The official story is that the professor and those students died 15 years ago. Room 204 just up and exploded, they said. Damnedest thing. And there's some truth there. That room did explode. But it wasn't an accident. We knew exactly what we were doing. Or we thought we did. They call me an assistant supervisor of maintenance. But really I'm a janitor and always have been. You might wonder why I'm still at it after getting that $1 million. That dough is for Junior, so he doesn't have to go through the same shit that I did. The night this happened, I was assigned to the Astrophysics Center, a bit northwest of the main Harvard campus. Until that night, this was always my favorite beat. I mean, God help you if you wound up at one of the biology labs. Those goddamn dead, cut open animals all over the place used to give me nightmares. And really, thinking back, I'd take those nightmares of mutilated and scattered organs any night over the stuff that has haunted me ever since. Anyway, I was there mopping the hallway on the second floor of the lab building when the door to room 204 opened up and this guy popped his head out. "Hey you." I looked around to make sure he was talking to me. "Yes? Can I help you, sir?" I thought he was gonna bitch about the room being a mess or something. "How'd you like to make $1,000, Chief? An hour's work at most. Easy money. Does that sound good to you?" It sure did. Things were tight at home, as they always were. 1,000 would knock off some of those long overdue bills. But I was also on a tight schedule. They didn't give you much breathing room. Don't want you standing around thinking about it all, I guess. "That sounds great, sir," I said, but I got to stick to my beat. The man laughed. "We're about to make history, Chief," he said. "And you're worried about emptying the bathroom trash? Come on, don't sweat it. You won't get in trouble. I promise. I'm a professor here. I'll vouch for you." The guy did look like a professor, with carefully combed gray hair and big old glasses on his face. I shrugged, leaned my mop against the wall and said, "Sure. What do I have to do?" "That's fantastic. Come on in, Chief. Come on in." I followed him into the room. One look, and I should have just turned around then and there and told him to keep his damn money. But I didn't. As soon as I stepped in, I felt the little hairs all over my body stand up. I don't mean I was scared. I mean like there was an electrical charge in that room, and I had a guess about where it was coming from. There in the center of the room, on a round table, was a large glass globe, crackling with electricity. Like what you see if you go into a kid's science museum. Like they somehow created a lightning storm in a glass ball. This one was sort of vibrating around on its stand and buzzing. And the lightning inside was black. I could feel the electricity coming from it from across the room. There were 4 kids there, students, I guessed, sitting in a row of chairs along one wall. More than sitting, they were strapped into those chairs, with metal things over their heads like those big bowl things you see at a hair salon. They all had their eyes closed. I said, "What's going on here? Those kids okay?" "They're quite fine," said the professor. "As to what is going on, as I said, we are about to make history. We are going to open the first wormhole." "Wormhole?" I said. "Like in the movies?" The professor laughed. "I suppose so, Chief," he said. "Now listen, we had a last-minute cancellation, but that's okay because it's an easy job. We're going to be kicking things off here shortly, and once they are properly kicked off, the wormhole will open. I will enter. If I am not back in 30 minutes, you are to pull that lever there, and this will close the wormhole." I looked to where he was pointing, at a big red lever attached to a giant, whirring machine that was hooked up to the metal bowls over the students' heads. "But won't you be trapped on the other side of the wormhole?" I asked. Not that I had the slightest idea about what the hell was going on. Just so, Chief, said the professor. We've got this down to two possibilities. One, the wormhole opens up to what we're calling the second universe. The best way that I can explain this possibility is that there is a different reality that exists on the other side of this one, the other side of an invisible wall. The wormhole will provide a door in that wall. And the other possibility? That the wormhole will open to a place that man was not meant to go. 30 minutes will give me enough time to get in and out, if the first possibility is true. And if it's the second, then you'll close the hole with that lever, and my students will destroy my work. This was all way above my pay grade, and my head was spinning. Why only two possibilities? How the hell did they come up with those two? And if this real, why the hell would the professor take a coin-toss chance of getting stuck in the place that man was not meant to go? I mean, those were just starter questions among the swarm that was buzzing around my head. I see that you have some reservations, said the professor. I assure you that your only job is to pull that lever after 30 minutes. That's it, Chief. We'll take care of the rest. And anything that happens isn't on you. The documentation is quite in order. He tapped a folder that was sitting on the circular table. And here, I'll write you a check now before we proceed. As he wrote out the check, I wondered if it would still be valid if he got swallowed up by the wormhole. I actually had that thought, as crazy as it sounds. It was still all so weird and abstract to me at that point. Here, he said, handing over the check. Let's do it, Chief. As soon as I enter that hole, give me exactly 30 minutes. On the dot. That's all you have to do. I took the check, mumbled a thanks, and watched as he walked over to the machine. He pulled the lever. There was a loud crackling sound, and I watched in unease as one by one, the students' eyes shot open. There were no pupils there, like their eyes were rolled back in their sockets. Hey now, I said, taking a step towards the machine. They are quite fine, said the professor. I assure you. Their jaws started to move like they were grinding their teeth. The professor took a jar of neon blue liquid from a shelf on the wall. He unscrewed the lid and poured the stuff over the electric globe on the round table. The thing started going crazy, and then the globe shattered completely, bits of glass flying through the air as shoots of black lightning zapped out into the room. I ducked down. I had had enough by then, and was ready to get the hell out of there. Then it happened. A fucking black hole appeared in the middle of the room, sucking in the bolts of electricity. It grew larger and larger, until it took up half the room. All I could hear was this rushing sound, like the world's largest vacuum cleaner running at full throttle. Remember, Chief, shouted the professor, with a wild look on his face. 30 minutes exactly. Then he stepped into the thing and was gone. At first my mind was a mess, staring at that whooshing black hole that seemed hungry to suck everything in. I looked at the kids hooked up to the machine, their eyes rolled back. White holes, I guess they looked like, their jaws grinding away like crazy. It was too much to make sense of. I looked down at my watch. 15 minutes and 31 seconds had gone by since the professor got swallowed up by the wormhole. My heart was pounding, and I kept pacing back and forth, trying to work out what the hell was going on. Then I started to zero in on it. I was getting pranked. Not a prank like we used to do as kids, setting dog's hit on somebody's front steps and all that idiocy. I mean a prank like the sophisticated college folk do, where they tell you something's going on, but the whole point is to just observe your reaction. A psychological experiment. Probably cameras in here watching me right now. See what I do? 12 minutes to go. I saw a trickle of blood come down from one of the kids' nose. I leaned down to look at him closely. He was shaking a little bit all over. If I throw that lever, this will all probably stop. Maybe that was the test. I had to decide between trapping the professor in the black hole and saving the kids hooked up to the machines. None of it was real, of course, but they didn't know that I knew that. But then, screaming in the back of my mind was that voice. What if it is real? 10 minutes to go. The professor had promised me that the kids were all right. Another one started bleeding from the nose. If it wasn't real, it was a hell of a trick. Where did the professor go, if not through that black hole? I thought about touching it, but whenever I got close, I was filled with total terror. It sure seemed real, like it really took you someplace far, far away from here. I walked over to the table and picked up the folder that was there. Just like the professor had said, The first page was instructions to shut down the machine and destroy it if he didn't return within 30 minutes. I flipped that page over, and the next one had a photograph of one of the students. I read what it said. It was a consent form. I, Jackson Stewart, acknowledge the possibility of my imminent death if I participate in this experiment. I am prepared to give my life to science. I flipped that page, and there were 3 more just like it. Now, I'm no lawyer, but there was no way in hell that this experiment was legal, if it was real, even with those consent forms. So it probably wasn't real. And if it was, then the professor lied to me. He had said that the kids were fine. This folder was telling me something else. 2 minutes to go. I took a deep breath and paced the room, watching each second tick by. My mind was telling me that none of it was real, but my gut was screaming in horror. I just looked at my watch. It would be over soon enough, one way or the other. 30 seconds. I walked over to the machine and put my hand on the lever. Goddamn it, why is he cutting it so close? I watched the seconds tick by, and I didn't know if I could do it. I didn't know if I could risk trapping the professor wherever the hell he had gone off to. 5 seconds. My hand was shaking. For seconds. Sweat was pouring down my face, dripping into my eyes. 3 seconds. One of the students started to moan. The one that I saw was named Jackson in the folder. 2 seconds. Oh God, oh God, oh God. 1 second. Jackson started to shake. 0 seconds. Shit. I tensed my muscles to pull the lever. One look at Jackson, and I knew I had to pull it. He was violently jerking around now. Wait! I snapped my neck around to see the professor's head sticking out of the black hole. Wait, damn it! Then his shoulders were through. I turned back to Jackson. Blood was pouring out of his eyes. I'm almost through. A second kid started to shake. 1 more second. I looked to see that the professor was through. He was back in the room. Do it, he shouted. 2 things happened after that, at the exact same time. I heard a wet popping sound, and I watched as the wormhole disappeared, as though it was never there. But I had never pulled the lever. I slowly turned to look at Jackson. His head was gone. Judging by the bits of brain and splatters of blood on the bowl thing above his neck, his head had just exploded. The whirring of the machine gradually died down, and then it was silent. The 3 kids who were still alive stopped shaking and closed their eyes. A tragedy, said the professor, pointing at Jackson with the exploded head. But not for nothing. I've been there. I've seen it. Chief, I've seen it. I hunched over and puked. It was weird, but my first thought was, what a mess I'll have to clean up later. I don't know. I guess my mind had sort of shut down, and I was going on autopilot. I was the janitor. I cleaned up messes. That was all I knew. Then it hit me, the reality of what had happened. You son of a bitch. I yelled. You told me those kids would be okay. The professor put this sickening smug grin on his face. He would have been, Chief, had you pulled the lever at the 30-minute mark as instructed. You told me to wait. Did I? Yes, you fucker. I'm calling the police. I had a walkie clipped to my belt. It wouldn't get me the police, but it would get campus security. I reached for it and had it in my hand when I heard a groan behind me. I turned to see that it was one of the kids. They were waking up. I went over to unstrap them from the chairs. The first kid's eyes blinked open, and when she saw the professor, she started screaming. It's okay, I said. Shoo, it's okay, it's all over. She kept screaming, then the second kid woke up. He looked right at me with wide, terrified eyes. Get us out of here, he shouted. I'm working on it, kid, I said, fumbling at the straps. They were on tight. The third kid woke up. It's here, she said. It made it through. Everything's okay now, I said. Your friend didn't make it, I'm afraid, but it's over. I'll make sure the professor pays for what he did to you and your friends. The first kid was still screaming at the top of her lungs. Get us out of here, shouted the second kid again. The third kid looked me dead in the eyes and in a totally calm voice said, That's not the professor. What? Of course it is, I said. What I saw when I turned to look at the professor will haunt me forever. The professor's mouth was twisting around at odd angles, like something was moving the lower half of his jaw randomly, or like he was trying to get a hair out of his mouth that kept jumping around. The veins on his neck bulged, then sunk back down, then bulged again, so that they were thick as ropes. His wrists were rotating in ways they weren't supposed to rotate, as his arms flailed around wildly. I had the first kid, the screaming one, free. She jumped out of the chair and ran to the door, but her legs were wobbly, and she tripped over herself in the middle of the room. I went to work on the second kid, whipping my head around every second to look at the professor. It looked like there was something crawling around under his skin. Something big. "Get us out of here!" the second kid shouted yet again. The first kid was still on the ground, screaming. I worked away furiously on the straps. "If you believe in God," said the third kid with an eerie calm, "then pray." I took a glance at the professor, and that's when the first bone burst out of his chest, through his suit. I call it a bone, but it was pure black and dripping with green slime. "As for me," said the third kid, "I do not believe that there is a God, not after what I have seen." The second kid was free and made a run for it. I scooted over to the third kid, but watched as the professor reached out an arm and grabbed the second kid by the top of his head. The professor gave one quick twist and let go. I heard a terrible snap, and the kid slumped to the ground, dead. 3 more black bones came out of the professor's chest, dripping. He laughed and bent down to the first kid, who was still screaming, as bones began to poke out of his back, like a fucking stegosaurus from hell. "What is that thing?" I asked, as I fumbled at the straps of the last kid. "It does not belong here," said the kid. "No shit," I said, getting one strap free. "But what is it?" "It comes from a terrible place. A place where there is nothing save pain. Endless pain, incomprehensible to our minds." "Great," I muttered, as I noticed with a sinking heart that the screams from the girl behind me had stopped. Then I heard a wet crunch. I couldn't help it. I looked to see the professor tearing into that poor girl's throat with long black fangs, dripping in green slime. I turned back to the kid, almost done with the straps. "Just a few more seconds. What's your name anyway, kid?" "Claire." "Claire," I said, my mind trying to stay focused. "When I get you out of these straps, I want you to pick up this chair and throw it at that thing, okay? I'll do the same thing, okay? Then we make a run for it. Do you understand? Can you do that?" "I understand," said Claire. "I do hope it works." I did hope it would work, too. "We have to make it work, Claire," I said, yanking off the last strap. "Come on." We stood up together, and I reached over to pick up a chair. I hurled it at the professor with all of my strength, and it shattered against his bone back. I heard a terrible shriek then, and watched as Claire's chair followed behind. I grabbed Claire's arm with one hand, and reached for my pocket knife with the other. The only way out of that room meant passing by the professor. We started running as I pulled the knife out and flicked it up. The professor stood, still shrieking, as the green slime mixed with the red blood from the kid's throat and dripped down his chin. I took a wild stab at the professor's neck and connected. I kept running with Claire, leaving the knife stuck in the professor's neck, and made it to the door. I had my hand around the knob when I felt Claire pulling away from me. I looked back, helpless, as I saw the professor reach long black claws into her gut. I threw the door open and left her there. Good God, I left her there. I made it outside the lab building somehow. I don't remember how. My mind just sort of shut down as I ran like hell, I guess. I did have the presence to go around and lock all of the doors from the outside. Then I got on the radio to campus security. "You guys need to get the police over to the Astrophysics Center fucking ASAP. There was a fucking massacre in there." The front door started to rattle, and I heard the Godawful shriek again. "Repeat," said a voice over the walkie. "Look," I said, "call up Lawrence Summers right now." That was the president of Harvard at the time, and I had seen his signature on the papers in that folder with all of the consent forms. "Tell him that the wormhole experiment has gone way the fuck south." The rattling at the door stopped. I only prayed that that thing didn't figure out it could just break a window and crawl out that way. "This is the janitor, right?" said a different voice on the other end of the walkie. "Is this a joke? The wormhole experiment. Have you been drinking? Call Lawrence Summers. If you don't, I promise you that you'll never be able to live with yourself. Do it now." There was a horrible pause. I heard the professor trying the side door now, shrieking once again. 10-4. A fleet of black SUVs pulled up 2 minutes later. A team of heavily armed men jumped out and ran past me, breaking the windows and jumping inside. I heard a stream of gunfire. And screams. So many screams, and the professor's horrible shrieks. After a while, it was quiet, and a second team of men jumped through the broken windows. I didn't hear any more gunfire. I felt a hand on my shoulder and whipped around. A man was standing there. I don't remember a single thing about what he looked like, but I remember our conversation. "Tell me what happened," he said. I told him the full story, the same one that I've told you. "We are prepared to give you a lot of money to sign an NDA. NDA? Non-disclosure agreement. It means that you can never tell anybody about what happened here tonight." "How much?" $1 million. "And a promotion." The man paused. "You mean you still want to work here after tonight?" "Somebody's got to clean up the shit," I said. "Fine, of course. And one more thing." "And what's that?" asked the man. "I want to know that this will never happen again. I want you to blow all of that shit up and burn all of the notes." "Of course. And I want to watch." "Of course," said the man. And so I thought it was over. But it's not. Last night, I saw the professor again. He looked me right in the eyes, flashed that smug grin, and said, "Hey there, Chief." That's when I ran the hell out of there. The police don't believe me. I've sent a dozen emails to Lawrence Summers' assistants. I've called every number that I've found listed for him. I haven't heard anything back. I don't know who else to turn to. I'm afraid the professor is going to open the wormhole again. And I'm afraid this time, he might bring his friends back with him. My friend and I have known each other since high school. We ended up going to the same college. We moved to the same neighborhood and started working at the same place. It was all coincidental, but it allowed us to be close friends, even though we had nothing in common but life and coincidences. At one point, about 4 years ago, she changed jobs. First, we had regular lunches, but then I also moved out of the neighborhood and into a house in the suburbs. So without daily interactions at work, without living close to each other, we just drifted apart. For a few years, we only talked on birthdays and major holidays, wishing each other well, updating each other on random life events, etc. This year, for my birthday, she wrote me and told me she's buying a house. Again, coincidentally, it was very close to where I had moved, about 10 minutes drive. She invited me to her new house party, and then messaged me after thanking me for coming. A few days later, she messaged me again, and soon after, we started getting back in touch. As this was happening in mid-June, and with summer just around the corner, we didn't have time to see each other again before I went on holiday, but we were texting each other daily almost. She told me she got a cat and sent me pictures. It was a gorgeous little rescue. She was black all over, except for her paws, which were white. It looked like she was wearing shoes, so my friend named her Boots. From the pictures and videos, Boots was loving, cuddly, and sweet. So when I came back from holiday, I didn't think twice before I agreed to stop by my friend's house every evening and look after the cat, while she went on holiday for a week too. I even proposed to take her over at my place, but since I had a dog, and my friend didn't know how Boots would react, we agreed that I'd just drop by every night for a few hours as my schedule allowed it. As her flight was departing before mine would have landed, we didn't manage to meet, and she couldn't give me her house keys. So she gave me the code to her garage. I could very easily enter like that, and the job was simple enough. Check that the cat had sufficient dry food available, feed her a little satchel of wet food every evening, change her water, and clean her litter. I was also to spend an hour or so just cuddling or playing with her. Simple and adorable, right? Wrong. The first night went smoothly enough. I got there at around 8:30, around Boots' dinner time. She ate her wet food really well, and then we played for a while. "What's your favorite toy, Boots?" I asked her jokingly. She looked me in the eyes, ran into the bedroom, and came back with an orange plastic mouse. I was taken aback by the cat's ability to understand my question, but I assumed my friend was talking to her all the time, and the phrase "favorite toy" in relation to that specific mouse had come by a few times. The cat was associating. I replaced the water and the dry food, cleaned the litter box, and then lay down on her couch to read a little. Boots came over and started making biscuits on the blanket, which I used as a cover. I took some pictures and sent them to my friend, who was pleased with my service. Boots, loving all the attention, ear scratches, and sweet talk, laid on my stomach and started purring, fast asleep. "Oof, Boots, what's this smell?" I said, trying to dissipate the odor with my hand. "What a farty butthole you have, miss." "Very unbecoming for a lady," I argued. The cat meowed at me, as if to excuse herself or protest, and then got off the couch. "Ah, come on, Bootsy." "I didn't mean it," I argued back. I put my book down and checked the time. It was well past 11 p.m., pretty late, I thought. I packed my things, messaged my friend that I was on my way, made sure the garage door closed properly, and off I went. The next night, things went just as smoothly, with a very similar routine. Little food, little play, some chilling on the couch. Boots, again, came to lie down on my chest. And again, that god-awful smell. What is this?" I reacted, trying to grab the cat and bring her closer to my nose, to see where exactly it was coming from. I didn't know whether cats needed their anal glands checked like dogs did, but I was guessing this one might. But Boots, as elusive as any cat, ran away again, meowing at me from across the room. "Fine, miss, I have to go anyway," I responded. The third night is when things got weird. That terrible smell hit me as soon as I entered the house. "Oof!" I exclaimed and quickly texted my friend to see whether it was okay to stop the wet food. It smelled strongly of sulfur, like when my French bulldog eats cheese. Something needed to be done, I'd argued in the texts. This poor cat's stomach needed some sort of managing. My friend asked me if the poop is okay in the Littler box, and sure enough, it was. She suggested I reduce the portion, but not worry too much about it. Apparently, Boots can get a little gassy when stressed. I just opened the windows to air the place a little, making sure that Boots didn't attempt to escape. Then I proceeded to do the regular stuff, change the water, top up her dry food, and then went to lounge on the couch. This time, Boots didn't join me. Instead, she stood across the room from me and just stared. For the whole time I was there, she just stared, her piercing green eyes never blinking. I felt the need to end my evening short, so at 5 minutes after 10, I bid Boots adieu and left. The whole way home, I kept thinking of the eerie feeling of Boots and me sitting in the darkness, her staring me down, and me trying and failing to read. I wanted to check with my friend, but I didn't know how to put it in words. "Your cat is creepy," and stinks just sounded like a terrible thing to say to a pet owner. The next night I got to the house, the place was completely dark, even though I always left the light in the staircase leading from the garage to upstairs, as well as the hallway light upstairs on. My first thought was that the fuse box tripped, but when I flipped the light switch, it worked just fine. Strange, I thought. Not minding it too much, I went upstairs and tended to the cat's business. I also opened the windows as the sulfur smell persisted. This time, Boots did not greet me at the door. Instead, she was on the opposite side of the house, at the bottom of the stairs that led to the attic. "Bootsy, dinner." I called at her, but she just stared back. "Boots, come here." I tried again, walking towards her. As I started approaching her, Boots made her way up towards the attic. I didn't feel the need to follow her. "All right, you know where your food is. You'll find me on the couch," I yelled from the bottom of the stairs. The house also felt unnaturally cold. I went to check the thermostat, and sure enough, it dropped a few degrees. I texted my friend, who just told me not to worry about it. I shrugged and went to the bedroom to look for a thicker blanket or duvet for myself in her wardrobe. As I was snooping around, I heard something right above me. My heart stopped. It sounded like tiny footsteps. Then I remembered that it was probably in the attic, and that's Boots walking around. Maybe chasing a rat or two. I know cats are supposed to be fantastic at being quiet and light on their feet, but Boots was a bit on the heavy side. And well, cats these days just don't have the same instincts as before, I assumed. After finding a proper duvet, I made myself a hot tea and cuddled with a book on the couch. About 20 minutes later, Boots came back downstairs, moving around the couch. "Come on, silly goose, I'm sorry I called you a stinky poo," I said, looking at her. As if on command, she jumped up, and I noticed something in her mouth. "What's that, Bootsy?" I asked her, trying to get closer to her. "What do you have there?" Now, I know you all cat owners anticipated what's coming next, but I did not expect it. Boots came slowly closer, and as I stretched out my hand, she placed a dead rat in it. I couldn't tell what it was at first, but the instant the realization hit me, I yelped so loudly and shuddered so violently that I yeeted the rat all the way across the room. Lo and behold, the little shit wasn't dead, just stunned. The moment it hit the floor, it snapped awake and bolted. Boots followed in its tracks, but this time, the rat was too fast and the cat couldn't quite catch it. It seemed like there was a rat hole in the kitchen somewhere, and it managed to make its great escape. At least for now. I texted my friend the whole incident, suggesting that she might want to look for the hole and cover it up. Again, she replied telling me simply not to worry about it. Well, if she wasn't concerned, I sure wouldn't be. In the meantime, Boots proceeded to eat her wet food, and I went back to my book. After dinner, she came back to the couch and cuddled at my feet. The sulfur smell did not seem to leave her. 3 more days in Mommy's home, I told her, feeling bad for how stressful this must be for her to make her so gassy. She turned around and looked at me with her piercing green eyes, and just then I heard some more footsteps above us. Boots got startled, and her pupils dilated to the point the green in her eyes was a mere thin outline for the black pupils. Freaking rats, I told myself, but I knew better. Those were too heavy to be rat footsteps. I felt a strong urge to get out, and I checked the time. Oh my, it's almost 12, Bootsy. I must leave you, I said to her, grabbing my things in a rush. As I was walking towards the stairs that lead to the garage, I could hear the stomping tracing my steps from above, so I rushed for the door, feeling immensely relieved once outside. The next night I contemplated whether I should be going or not for a long time. But I couldn't not go. It didn't seem fair neither to the cat, nor to my friend whom I'd promised. So I decided to reach a compromise with myself. Go, feed the cat, clean the litter, replace the water, and leave. Then on Saturday I could afford to go during daytime, and maybe that would feel less eerie, and I could play with her for a longer time to make up for this day. So I did exactly that, or attempted to at least. I got there, Boots was waiting for me like the first few nights. "Hi baby girl," I said as she rubbed herself against my legs and purred. "I'm sorry, but this will be a short visit." This time, the footsteps started very early into my visit. "Get in, feed cat, get out," I told myself. Stomp, stomp, I could hear above me as I was preparing Boots' dinner. My fingers were shaking, and I could feel my pulse increasing. Stomp, stomp. "Here you go," I said, placing the food bowl down and trying my hardest to ignore whatever was going on in the attic. I went to the bathroom to clean the litter, and the footsteps followed above me. Stomp, stomp. I went back to the kitchen to check if Boots had finished her food and to replace her water, but this time the footprints didn't follow. Instead, they seemed to be going in the opposite direction, towards the stairs. This couldn't be good. My brain was trying to get me to move towards the stairs that lead to the garage, but my gut feeling was telling me to look for Salt. Stomp, stomp, I could hear still further in the distance. I started opening cupboards and searching frantically for anything. Plain salt, salt and pepper shaker, bag o' salt, anything. I found a Himalayan salt grinder and started grinding it on the counter. God, I hoped it would be good enough. The stomping stopped. I too stopped grinding and held my breath so that I wouldn't disturb the stillness and soundlessness that fell upon the house. Creak, creak. I shuddered. The steps were coming down the stairs. I had no doubt about it. I dragged whatever salt I could grind in my palm and made a run for the stairs, keeping my eyes closed at all times. As I reached the door and fumbled to find the doorknob in between squints, I noticed that the lights started flickering vigorously. The footsteps were now making their way down the hallway behind me. I started praying and throwing salt over my shoulder. I realized that I didn't know the words to Our Father in English, and started crying as I fumbled to remember. Then I started praying in Latin. I knew a little Latin since high school, and surprisingly enough, it came naturally to me. Pater noster, que es in caelus, sanctificetur nomen tuum. Stomp, stomp, adveniat regnum tuum. Fiat voluntas tua, sicut in caelo et in terra. Stomp, stomp, I could hear them picking up the pace, running at me. Panem nostrum quotidianum de nobis hodie. Et dimit nobis debita nostra. Stomp, stomp, and then they stopped right behind me. Sicut et nos dimittimus debitoribus nostris. Et any nos inducas in tentationem. I could feel cold breath down my neck. I could hear faint whispering that I couldn't understand. A witch's cackle in the distance. Sed libera nos amalo. Amen. I yelled, finishing my prayer and throwing all the salt I had left behind me. The whispering stopped. The footsteps stopped. The laughter stopped. The house reverted to its natural state of quietness. Every now and then I could hear a car driving by. I could see the headlights gently lighting up the room. I was certain whatever was behind me had vanished. But I never turned around, I never looked. I opened the door to the basement/garage, went downstairs, punched in the garage code, and got outside. Once outside, I ran across the street. I contemplated running all the way home, but I glanced over my shoulder to the house. It seemed fine, dark, quiet. I started sobbing as I called my friend. She didn't reply. I texted her, but still nothing. I stopped going to the house. I figured Boots would only be alone for 2 days at this point, and I left her plenty of dry food. I was too scared of what could happen next. I would just explain it all to my friend, and if she didn't understand, then tough luck. I knew my friend was to land on Sunday at 7 p.m., so I went to the airport and waited for her. "What are you doing here?" she said as soon as she walked through the arrival gates. "Well, I figured you'd need a drive home. Plus, I need to tell you something," I said, relaying the whole story and showing her the photos I'd taken, even the ones I'd sent to her before. She listened quietly, and when I was done, she stopped dead in her tracks, looked me in the eyes, and grabbed my hands. "Do you think I can stay with you tonight?" she asked softly. "What?" I asked, genuinely confused. "You don't want to see if your cat is okay?" "Andy, these pictures are undeniably from my house, but I don't have a cat," she said, showing me her phone. Our last conversation on her phone was her thanking me for coming to the party months ago. Let's get the obvious out of the way. Being a PI sucks. It's not what you think. It's pretty much harassing women. Men hire PIs to go harass their wives and girlfriends, and once in a blue moon you get asked to find a missing dog, or to harass a man instead. But that's it really. Sometimes I'm looking for hard evidence of infidelity, but a lot of the time my clients just want to rattle the soon-to-be ex. To make them paranoid and jittery, and less reliable in a courtroom, or less likely to pay attention to small print agreements that stiff them out of the holiday home. So that's my job. I'm a pawn, and it is almost always on behalf of the kind of men who think women reading a book in public are secretly looking for male attention. I don't have an office. I did for a short while. But things are tough, as I'm sure many of you know, and PI work isn't exactly lucrative. I don't know why I'm still doing this job, except to say I'm my own boss, and it's not easy out there. I went into this with vastly different expectations. If anyone wants to hire someone who was convicted of insurance fraud while training to be a police officer, let me know. Otherwise, I'm on my own, following people in cars and sleeping in dingy motels. So when someone reached out looking for a guy to stalk them, I just figured it was a fetish thing. I got a nephew who went to art school and makes big bucks painting cartoon characters doing fucked up stuff. He ain't painting the Sistine Chapel, but he pays the bills and looks after his family. I figure if that work is good enough for him, it's good enough for me. So I met the woman and was surprised at how normal she looked. It was in a public place, a park with a nice bench. And even though it was starting to rain a little, we didn't let it bother either of us. We sat there, 2 tape recorders running, and hashed it out. She said she liked me. If she hadn't, she wouldn't have gotten out of her car. That was flattering coming from her. Good-looking woman. Professional. I didn't know at the time, but I'd quickly figure out she was a forensic accountant. Anyway, we got talking. She never gave me her motivation, but I would later come to understand her as an amateur narcissist. She was new at loving herself. She was smart, accomplished, and actually rather beautiful, provided you didn't spend a great deal of time agonizing over things like symmetry or eyebrows, and instead paid attention to how a smile reaches the eyes, or how laughter sounds when it catches someone by surprise. But she grew up dirt poor and spent her teen years unable to visit the dentist or access a gym, or even just eat home-cooked food that wasn't microwaved. Plump frame, blotchy skin. Hair she kept short with a pair of scissors because her and her mother relied on the shampoo and soap they stole from the motel where they shared cleaning shifts. When she fumbled awkward questions at some of the better-looking boys in her class, she rarely met with success. That's not to say she was an outcast, either. She had a social life. It's just poor kids have to grow up early. Prom's a luxury. Eating isn't. If you know, you know. Otherwise, you might be surprised by just how fucking tough it can be for some kids in this country. Anyway, she got out of that hole, fought tooth and nail, got an education, a good job, and by the time she finished her victory lap and took stock of her life, she was 35 years old and 1,000 miles from the trailer she was raised in. And she looked good. The woman in the mirror was a stranger that she wanted to get to know. I think hiring me was an act of self-love. I think if she could have, she would have sat in a car and watched herself get a cup of coffee, spying closely at the professional-looking woman doing a little half-run, half-skip to get out of the rain. The way she stood in line rocking back and forth on her heels to the music in her AirPods, thinking no one noticed. She wanted to admire herself, but unable to time travel or clone herself, she instead resorted to hiring me as a kind of proxy. I had my own boundaries, of course. They covered anything that was going to get me in trouble. The gist of the contract, after a nice week spent meeting after work and talking, was that I was to follow her as often as I could and just observe her. Photos, videos, secret recordings, occasionally a little bit more. Nothing physical. For example, one time I inventoried her handbag after she left it in a taxi by accident. I'm not a photographer, but something about all those knickknacks laid out on a motel bed snapped with a black and white Polaroid, it looked good. Like something you'd see in a fancy gallery. Avant-garde, my nephew would say. She loved it, paid me a bonus for it, and everything. Anyway, this carried on like this for about 6 months. They were interesting times, tailing her across train stations, racing across open parking lots to install a tracker on her car, standing on a bridge and dropping an AirTag in her bag as she walked past. It was a little bit like being a spy. She even paid for me to buy high-end equipment. Crazy stuff. One camera. I could sit on my balcony and read the texts on her phone from a block away. Occasionally there were days where I couldn't or wouldn't keep up the required intensity. Stalking requires a lot of cardio. When that happened, when I didn't feel like following her into a crowded place, or sprinting halfway around town following her car, I'd do research. I'd investigate who this woman had once been. I created fake Facebook profiles and tracked down old school friends, spoke to former teachers, lovers, all of that. The whole job was a matter of mapping her out, like she was a country, you know? And a country isn't just hills and rivers and borders. Countries have history. She was happy with my initiative. The text she sent me when I showed her the research folder was a glowing commendation. First one I'd had in a long time. It was nice, someone telling me good job. She had a real way of making me feel like a kid getting a gold star. I didn't realize at the time, but I was putty in her hands. Head over heels, bless my stupid heart. Of course I didn't know what I was getting into, but I did just enough time to grow overconfident. I made the mistake of thinking that I wasn't going to find anything in her past that'd give me trouble sleeping. Boy, did I get that one fucking wrong. Her mother. That's where things took an odd turn. Now I knew from news reports the mother died in their trailer, while her daughter was off staying at some boyfriend's place for a few days. Natural causes, it read. I wanted to know a little more about what natural causes they were. Figured if there was a congenital thing, it seemed like maybe I ought to know. You'd think the way the trailer park owner reacted to me asking about it, I'd tried asking the Russian government for proof of a democratic election. Thin, reedy little woman, who gave me hell the moment I mentioned a name. What do you want to know that for? Who's asking? Who's paying you? Why you want to dig this shit up? Oh, she ripped me to pieces. I put it down to the natural sprinkling of crazies in the standard population and took a different tact. Started calling up the older folks in the park. Residents. Every single one of them put the phone down on me the second I mentioned her name. Well, all of them except one. Some people want to talk, and this old bastard was one of them. He had a lot to say about everything from the president to social media, and I let him ramble on before starting to press my point. Told him at the start I was a historian looking into the local area. That made it so it wasn't too suspicious when I began asking about this and that. Slowly making my way to the death of a 53-year-old woman a couple trailers down from him some years ago. Again, soon as I mentioned her name, there was a change in the air, even over the phone. For a second I thought this old guy was going to hang up just like the others. Could hear him smacking his dry lips as he mulled it over. Francine didn't deserve what happened to her, he said after a while. She wasn't a good woman. Didn't treat her daughter too good neither. But didn't deserve what happened. Maybe if they'd found her earlier, some of those fellas in white coats could have got more evidence, put that little wretch of hers away. But from what I understand, weren't much left of her at all. Then he hung up, leaving me with a whole lot of questions. This frustrated me. I had, until now, had a fair bit of luck at this new profession of mine. They say be careful what you get good at. Sad truth was, I was getting good at stalking, and this was my first real roadblock. I remembered the way I felt when she told me good job, and it bothered me I couldn't really say much about this critical part of her life. That, and well, maybe I still got a chip on my shoulder about being a failed policeman. If you give me a problem, I can sometimes drive myself crazy looking for a fix. So I hopped in my car and drove to the trailer park, damn near on the other side of the country. Don't know I was hoping to find. No way the trailer was still there, and it wasn't. But what I found odd was the lot hadn't been replaced. There was a hole in the ground about the right size and nothing else. Just an empty spot where the trailer had once stood. And the trailers on either side weren't occupied either. I could tell by politely and legally looking through the windows. Most of them were cleared out, but a few weren't. They still had plates and other knickknacks left hanging around, like the owners had left without bothering to pack. You shouldn't hang around there, mister. The girl who appeared stood a good 20 feet away, shouting over the wind, so as to be heard. Smell can make you awful sick. I wrinkled my nose, aware of the odor she was talking about. Had been since I approached the empty lot. A faint musty smell that made me think of an exotic pet shop. What do you mean? Smell makes you sick, she said like it was self-explanatory. Woman who died there left behind an awful stench. Made the neighbors sick, and the neighbors' neighbors, and so on for a couple trailers in a row. No one likes to live there now. Still can't. Had a couple move in a year or two back, and they got sick too. Daddy says it's a bad one. Not even rats go near that hole. The smell wasn't pretty, but this trailer park looked like the kind of place where hubcaps went missing regularly. Figured they would have been used to bad smells. What made this one so special? I looked over at the girl. Where is your dad? A few minutes later, and I was stood outside a trailer waiting pensively. The little girl had disappeared inside to fetch her father, and since then I'd been sat listening to the quietest trailer park in the whole world. Crickets and silence. Traffic on a distant highway. Place was dying, that much was clear. When the father finally did make an appearance, he said nothing for the first few minutes. Lit a cigarette, offered me one. I refused on account of having quit some time back. After a while he spoke up. I'd invite you in, but if you've been hanging around that old lot, not sure I want you inside my home. No offense. None taken, I replied. Sally says you're a historian. The man wasn't terribly old. Mid-30s, at a guess, but he looked me up and down like I was a teenager caught throwing eggs at his house. What are you really? P.I., I replied. How now that makes sense. Some relative looking for answers? Heard the Hendersons had a sister with money. That's exactly it, I lied. She didn't buy the official story. Nor should she, he replied. Henderson was fit as a fiddle day he moved in. Weren't no justice in what happened to those who got sick. And poor Francine. They say she died of natural causes. Man, even back then I knew it was shit, and I was just a lil kid. The smell alone. Think it's bad now, but at the time, before they came in with a crane to lift the trailer up whole and move it to the dump. Shit, it was something awful. There was talk of moving the whole park. Of course no one gave enough of a shit about us to go ahead and actually do it. What did she die of? Don't know. Only thing I am sure of is that girl of Francine's lied. Said her mother was live and well when she left before the weekend, and they was all on good terms, but that was bullshit. We heard, and fighting for weeks before, for one. And of course the body, state that was in, ain't no way it had been rotting for just a few days. He offered me another cigarette. I refused. He lit it up instead. Second one in what felt like just a few minutes. Made me itchy just to see. I wanted to say something, anything to get a little bit more. But I'd told a big lie pretending to be there on someone else's behalf, and didn't want to catch myself out. So I just sat and listened to the quiet buzz of his little patio light. After the second cigarette was done, he reached into his back pocket and took out an old photo. I hope you find justice for Henderson and the rest of them, he said. Only real bit of proof I ever had something fishy went on. He handed me the picture. Wasn't easy to see what I was looking at. Pile of old leaves, maybe. Mulch. I squinted at it for a few good seconds, but couldn't make heads or tails of it. What? Took that the day they arrived to get rid of the trailer. Had to stand on my friend's shoulders just to reach. What is it? I asked, my skin starting to crawl as I picked out details. Whatever I was looking at, it was slumped on a sofa with floral wallpaper in the background. It was about the size of a man, but riddled with holes and cavities the size of golf balls. In my whole life, I'd never seen something that looked like that. "Why, that's Francine," he said, "or at least what was left of her." He let me keep the photo. At a guess, that was the only interesting thing that had ever happened to that man, and he'd been waiting to share it with someone. All I had to do was give him an excuse. He seemed to take some pleasure in passing it on. Certainly found my reaction to it amusing. I must have gone pale as I grappled with thoughts of what had happened to make a body go bad like that. Back in the hotel, under a good light, I checked that picture again and again. Something about it made me deeply uncomfortable. Knowing a woman was under all that, all those holes and crevices must have been made in her flesh. And what had happened to her skin that had turned it such a funny texture? Looked furry, like the kind of thing that grows on top of a long-forgotten cup of coffee. A part of me considered asking my client about this, but I knew that wasn't the way to go. First, she probably wouldn't tell me good job if I had to ask. She hired me to do a certain thing, and that didn't involve politely requesting information right from the source. Second, well, I'd read the police reports, what was publicly available anyway, and she'd made it clear she'd left on the Friday and came home on the Monday, and, well, what if that guy was right? Did she really leave her mother alive and well? I mean, people kill, not just psychos. People like you and me. We do it every day, and sometimes we even pull it off. Only half of U.S. murders get solved. That's a fact. If anyone could be in the right half of that equation, it'd be her. She was smart as hell, my client. Even at 17, she would have been a clever one. Clever enough that she might easily have been able to cover her tracks. Gone over to some boyfriend, twisted his arm into giving her an alibi. Sure, I could see that. I just needed to figure out what the fuck was going on with that crime scene in the trailer. Thankfully, I got some friends still on the force, one of which I even have a bit of leverage on. At first, he couldn't find much on the actual mother, but then I asked him to see if he could take the photo I had, show it around, and see if anyone had seen something like it before. That proved a lot more fruitful. A few days later, he came back with a strange one, but straight away I saw the connection. I'll spare the details. Old man was found in a tub, all sorts of fucked up, in some old apartment building. It had since been condemned on account of the body, which is fairly weird since bodies don't usually cause that much fuss. But less weird when you realize that said body was in such a bad state it made 3 people sick and caused long-lasting structural damage. Whatever happened to this guy, it ate through the tub he'd been lying in and seeped into the floors and walls below. Turned plasterboard to shit, and apparently even caused some trouble for the sturdier elements like steel and concrete. I don't know how that works exactly, but that's what the file said, and going by the photos, I didn't feel like anyone was lying. As for the pictures, what can I say? Made my fucking skin crawl. No blurry little Polaroid snapped by a kid. These were professional crime scene pictures that showed something in a bathtub that didn't register as human until my eyes went looking for details. He looked like a hairy paper wasp's nest, only there were fingers and nipples and other little things that made it clear it had been built using a person as the framework. No face though, just a head like a pile of used paper plates. Looking at those photos made me learn a new word just to describe how I felt. Trypophobia. Wasn't just the one guy either. Building was linked to the disappearance of the ground floor tenant. Some computer geek. I didn't worry about him too much. But what did catch my eye was there was only one woman living in the whole place. Second floor apartment. The registered name was somewhat familiar. Close enough to a certain someone's that it raised the hairs on my neck. Police at the scene managed to get a photo of her, and sure enough, there she was. My client going by a different name. Clearly something fishy was going on, or else why the pseudonym? I figured it possible she'd maybe offed her own mother. Parents and spouses make the most common victims. But what connection was there to that second corpse, and what about the missing guy? It was like a horror movie was following her around, and she was just blissfully unaware. Condemned buildings and festering trailers made for a far cry from the professional accountant who enjoyed oat milk lattes and used sweetener instead of sugar to spare her teeth. But there was no denying she was the connection. There was photographic proof she'd lived in that building. If I wanted to get ahead of this, to really understand what was going on, I had to figure out what had happened to those bodies. I'd pretty much exhausted my favors with the police, and truth was they didn't know any more than I did. But it turned out the building was still standing. condemned, but they hadn't demolished it, partly because no one wanted to take responsibility. But I reckon it might have had something to do with the biohazard warnings slapped on every single window and door. Good thing I'd brought a gas mask. I waited for sunset, geared up, and entered through the unlocked door. First thing that hit me as the door swung open was the smell. Similar to the trailer park, but full pelt and hot as hell. Made me think of lizards and poorly kept terrariums. Strong enough to make my eyes water, even through the mask. One thing was clear as I took a look around the hallway. The building was diseased. Not just run down or decrepit like the usual urban decay. This was something else. Looked like the inside of a clogged pipe. You know how limescale fills it up. It was a bit like that. This oily rust-colored fluid had seeped down the walls and left them glistening and soft. Ropus stalactites of the stuff hung down from the ceiling like old party banners, and I edged around them afraid of what might happen if one touched me. Best guess was that stuff was digesting the place. Anything soft or organic was going or gone. Old umbrella frames were left standing in one corner, the fabric burnt or dissolved away. The carpet was reduced to just a few patches no bigger than my hand, and a bunch of old cardboard boxes piled up under the stairs had turned squat and half liquid, almost flowing down and around each other. The worst came when I took a look in the back room. More of a broom closet, I guess. Wouldn't have gone in, but something caught my eye. A well-worn shoe that wasn't covered in that oily shit. Sign of recent activity. That and the way the door was ajar just raised my suspicions, so I took a look. Even now the timeline eludes me, but someone, a vagrant most likely given the way they were dressed, died a nasty death in there. Chemical burns come to mind. They were balled up in one corner, eyeless, looking up at me as I pushed the door open to take a closer look. Pink flesh threaded with red blood vessels, yellow bones poking through here and there. From the looks of things, they'd been trying to work the door open. You could see a history of their escape attempts left by bleeding hands. Rust-colored finger streaks ran all along the door's edges, special attention paid to the hinges. And he'd broken the only window and tried hauling himself up there only to realize it was barred from the other side. The jagged glass that still clung to the frame was covered in old blood. His palms must have looked like grated cheese. Eventually he'd given up and lain down in that shit, and the thought of it made my chest feel heavy and tight. I'd only been in the building a few minutes, and that shit was already eating through my shoes. I could hear the thick rubber soles sizzle and pop with each step. But that guy had been forced to sit down in an inch-deep puddle of the stuff, likely because exhaustion had left him no choice but to tough it out. So how long had he tried staying upright? Hours? Days? Weeks? Him getting stuck in there had to be deliberate. I was sure of it, a feeling in my gut. Someone had locked the door behind him and left him to die slowly. God only knows why, but did that mean they were still hanging around and waiting for a chance to get to me? Looking around, I sure didn't feel safe or alone. The shadows seemed too deep, and the steady drip, drip, drip of that rancid oil oozing out of every surface was too monotonous. Someone or something lived in that filth, and chances were they'd been responsible for that poor vagrant's agonizing death. That meant getting out of that shithole was a priority, so I made for the stairs and started the climb. If there were any answers in that place, it'd be in the apartment where that old man died. The crime scene tape was still hanging off the door frame when I found it, and the TV and sofa, or what remained of them, stood in the same place as in the photos. Back in the day the old man had been a hoarder, and I was surprised crime scene hadn't cleared all his shit out. It was all still there. Only what had once been a chest-high maze of papers and magazines was now just a kind of hardened pulp, almost like magma dried mid-flow. Whole fucking place was covered in the stuff like a coral reef, growing up the walls and even patches of the ceiling. Looked a hell of a lot like a wasp's nest, and it looked to be the source of that oily-looking fluid. You could see it sweating out of every crease and fold in that strange hive. It was almost hypnotic to look at. Glistening amber beads oozing out of papery sheets that flowed like rock striata. There was a gentle, barely perceptible rhythm. Hypnotic. I don't know why, but I reached out and ran the tip of my finger as gently as I could along the surface. It felt like the underside of a mushroom. All those papery gills. Gossamer thin. Soft and inviting. I wore no gloves, and the brief moment of contact had deposited a single bead of that strange syrup on my fingertip. It caused a tingling sensation that was not entirely unpleasant. Even the blood that trickled down my knuckle felt warm and wet, like testing a hot bath with your hand. I liked it. I liked it, and I wanted more. I went to reach out and push my arm into the nest when a hand burst out of the nest and gripped my wrist. I was so surprised I didn't even make a noise, but instead wordlessly fell back as the hand pushed me away from the nest. A very nearly skinless forearm followed, and soon after a face emerged from the papery nest like a grime-covered nightmare. Black eyes and a lipless mouth. It was a man that could have passed for a corpse, like a half-digested piece of meat. Terrified, I struggled to my feet and realized that this person had broken damn near every bone in my wrist with that single grip. "Your meat smells raw," he growled before heaving himself out of the nest in a disgusting parody of childbirth. My sanity flickered, and the next thing I knew I was on the ground floor with bleeding eyes and both hands frantically pulling at the door handle. My mind returned in pieces. I blinked red tears away, but didn't stop trying to open the door. I felt it, that urgent need to leave, like a suffocating man feels the need to breathe. But I'd fucked up bad. I'd sniffed out the closet and saw the trap laid there, but hadn't seen the larger one set for me. There was only one way in and out of that building, and I hadn't jammed the door open. Now it was shut, and nothing I did could get it open. With more time, maybe I could have pried the jam, or even kicked it down, but my heart was racing and my vision blurring. I wanted out of that place. A hot primal need to get the hell out. The air was too hot. My mask too stifling. Sweat condensed on the inner plastic and made it damn near impossible to see. And the pain in my wrist was a throbbing explosion that made sensible thought impossible. I'd realized early on into my little foray that I was underprepared, but the scale of what that meant eluded me until I was there wrestling with thoughts of exposure and contagion and disease, fumbling at a greasy doorknob with a broken hand, while suppressing thoughts of what might be crawling up my leg or back or neck. Panic threatened to consume me. The world and all the normality it represented was right fucking there. I could hear it. The distant hum of traffic. The amber glow of streetlights that lit up the biohazard posters. Not 30 minutes ago I'd been there. Safe and far away from this waking nightmare. I was being reduced to a prey animal. Even in the moment I could sense it happening to me. Being made into something lesser. But it was like my actions were no longer my own. When I finally gave up on the front door, I turned around and saw the shadows way back at the hallway begin to shift as something descended the stairwell. There was no other way out. No door. No window. Just me, a long corridor, and a nightmare coming right at me. Something inside me gave up. I don't know how to describe it. I'm still not sure if it was that building and that strange fluid that seemed to warp my own thoughts. Or maybe there's just too much one person can go through. But I could practically hear the thin membrane of my sanity tear as I fell backwards into the door and slid down onto my ass, breathlessly awaiting my terrible fate. I almost contemplated turning off my light, but by then it was too late. I could see him coming towards me. He was legless. Nothing from the waist down except blackened viscera trailing up the stairs behind him. He pulled himself towards hand over hand with hungry eyes. Before I knew it, he was on top of me, one hand gripping my mouth with a salty palm, the other stroking my hair. And then in an instant his demeanor changed. He pulled back with a terrified cry and scrambled away like I'd just stuck him with a blade. "No, no, 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 no," he muttered. "No, no, you should have said, I didn't know I thought you were another, when I didn't know I thought you were here for me, I didn't know you were hers." He cowered away, pedaling on both hands backwards while keeping his eyes fixed on me. "Tell her I did not know you were hers, I could not smell until I was close, very close. If I hurt you, I am sorry. Tell her I am sorry. I did not mean to hurt you, it is just I do not get to eat often, and am always hungry." With a rapid gesture, he threw the key for the door at me. It skittered across the floor and fell just short of my feet. "Tell her I did not know." "WWW, what are you?" I stammered. He looked at me curiously, stopping his retreat only briefly to gauge my expression. She likes to be seen, but I looked without asking, and I got what I deserve. "Who are you talking about?" I asked. He very nearly laughed, but with such deformities it was mostly a drooling guffaw. "You know," he gasped. "Don't be stupid. You're in love with her. Just like me. But different. You got permission." I didn't. But she was good. She left me an old nest to live in. And I have permission to eat anything I kill or trap myself. Hard now that people know to stay away, but sometimes I get lucky. His eyes flicked to the closet with sickening hunger. What has this got to do with her? I asked. What color are her eyes? He replied, almost manic with excitement. Answer. Answer. Tell me. Tell me. What color are her eyes? Gee. I stopped. The word felt wrong in my mouth. BL. Bro. No, he chittered. None of those. Seemingly excited but afraid, he raced forward momentarily and gripped my lapels with twisted glee. Compound, he hissed with such forbidden pleasure. Her eyes are compound. She's jealous of us, you know? Jealous we get to love her. And then he disappeared into the darkness, and something inside me gave way entirely, and I passed out. I don't know much of what came after, exactly. I was found a few hours later in my car, idling at a traffic light. I'd made some effort at getting away on my own, but didn't get very far. No surprise here, but I got sick as a dog going in that place. A deep chest infection. The kind that scares everyone at least once in their life. Only fair given how fucking stupid I was. But forgive me, I hadn't anticipated nightmares beyond human comprehension. I challenge anybody to think that fucking far ahead. You think junkies. You think flies. Squatters. But that guy, that man slipping out of the nest and barreling towards me on two hands. My mind going sizzle pop along with the soles on my boots. In real life, shit like that always sneaks up on you. So I paid the price. 6 months. Jesus. 6 long months. I got every fever you can think of. Sepsis. Kidney failure. Liver failure. Month after month drowning in my own fluids, coughing up shit that made the nurses gag and leave. I asked the doctor what the long-term effects will be, and he winced before reading a list of things that didn't leave much hope for a happy retirement. And if it was hard on my body, it was even worse on my mind. Those fever dreams, doctors say what I remember in that building, that was all just part of the sickness. Say I spent a good 3 days in a coma, and strange dreams are the norm. Which I might accept if it weren't the fucking skin graft still healing on my right hand. No one can explain that. My client visited. Just the once. There are universally sad moments in life, and one of them is realizing someone you have a lot of affection for doesn't have it back. They have some, just not the same amount. It was always one way though, wasn't it? I saw her every single day, but if I was doing my job right, she only saw me once a month for our meetings. Our arrangement ended not long after, so I hope anyway. She left like it was nothing but me. Jesus, it felt like someone excavated my heart right out. Even after what she told me why she was there, even after what I did, I could barely stand up straight. I was so heartbroken. There were times after that I wished the sickness would just take me. Maybe that defeatism is why it got so bad. Who knows? She came to me looking for a recommendation of all things. She wasn't cold. Far from it. But there was a sense of disappointment as she sat beside me and eyed me up. I liked the initiative, she said after a while, but the results leave me unimpressed. What the fuck happened in that place? I asked, and even though I could barely hear my own voice, she seemed like she heard every word. For a moment, the way she contemplated it, I thought I was going to get a straight answer. You know, my mother said men don't see ugly women. They know they exist, but they just poof them right out of their mind. Like a magic trick. She said we worked better being a little plain. Good enough to take home for a night. Any more, and we'd start to leave problems everywhere we go. That guy was a problem. She was trying to warn me about the dangers of attention, but silly me. I went and got addicted. I hoped with you there might be a degree of separation. Infatuation on a contractual basis. She took a deep breath like she'd had a long, hard day. I don't know. Maybe Mom was right. It's ridiculous, I suppose. The fly shouldn't admire the spider. It either sees it and fears it, or doesn't know what's coming until it's too late. I think Mom was telling me to go for the latter. It's no fun being invisible, though. You spent all that time looking at me, following me. What did you see? I looked at her until my eyes watered and something throbbed in my skull. I don't know. I tried to lie. Be honest. She looked right at me and something in the air changed. I don't know what. Hot. Jesus, it was hot. Like looking at the sun. I remember the heart rate monitor going nuts, and then I remember gossamer wings and serrated chitin. A tick on the inside of your cheek. A leech on your tongue. A horsehair worm that won't leave the skin. And then an instant later my eyes refocused, and there was just a normal woman in front of me. Someone I could have loved, I answered, unable to stop the words spilling like vomit. Someone who I thought deserved love. See, she said, who wouldn't like your version better? I was crying again, heart racing, world like butter, going soft at the edges. Whatever she did, it was like undergoing brain surgery in real time. I'd like a recommendation, she said after another minute or two of silence. I'd like to see myself. I look in the mirror and I don't see what you do. I'd like an artist to paint me. A version of me, at least. It won't be easy on them. All this time you've probably looked directly at me for no more than 5-10 minutes in total. Just didn't realize it. Always the back of my head or my hair obscuring just so. That won't do. I want a portrait. I want to know what you see. What will you do to them? I won't do anything. Not intentionally. But if you ask someone to paint the sun, expect them to go blind. Whoever paints me will be painting the sun in their living room. Going blind is the least of their problems. Now fess up. You know someone. You mentioned them once in passing. A cousin maybe. An artist in need of cash. I'm sure of it. Why would I tell you anything? Because you love me, she said. And because despite everything you will get better and you will come back to me. Year or two, I think. You are adamant I have no hold on you, and you will think that for a long time. And this period of freedom, you'll enjoy it only by my good grace and mercy. You did a good job, better than any before. I've read your notes and reports over and over and seen details of myself I didn't even know were there. It's a thing of beauty what you did. And one day soon you'll come back to me with some excuse for why you want the contract to continue. I tried to spit the word never but managed, at best, a weak shake of the head. Something that put a most peculiar smile on her face. It doesn't work like that. It'd be like trying to brute force your way through Alzheimer's. You'll be back. Even now you're mine. All mine. I'm just being gentle. And you're going to give me the name and number of this artist, because even though you know I could no more love you than a spider loves the fly, you are desperate to please me. Because when I broke the man in that apartment building, when I tore him in two and told him that he would live for as long as I desired, writhing without air for years and years, drowning in sickly fluids and trapped helplessly in a hive he is determined to maintain even though I wouldn't be caught dead going back there. He was grateful. And with time you'll be grateful too. She put the pen in my hand. She smiled, mouthed the word good boy, and God help me. I gave her my nephew's number.